This lesson is going to introduce inequalities and show you how to solve basic inequalities. Remember that inequalities are the symbols that we use when we have a number is greater than or equal to, less than, or less than or equal to another number. So our answer is not going to be x equals 10. It'll be a range of numbers. X is a number greater than 10. On this page in your notes, let's take a look at the basic introduction. Like I just said, an inequality represents a range of numbers, not just one solution. And we usually graph our solutions to inequalities on a number line. So we need to think about what the inequality says in words. And I want you to always start by phrasing your inequality with x is, or k is, q is, because when you start with the number, it gets a little confusing. When I take a look at the first example, I should be saying x is greater than 5. N is less than -4. I don't want to start with the 6 because it really doesn't make sense. What we're concerned about, again, is solving for our variable. In this case, I'm going to rewrite this, and I would state it as p is greater than 6. We graph them on a number line, and to do so we need to decide first if we're going to use open or closed circles. We use a closed circle where we have greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. We use an open circle when it's just greater than or less than. Now, if the variable is to the left, like it was in this example and this example, we can always point our graph the same way as the inequality. X is greater than 5, I know that's going to point to the right. N is less than -2 will point to the left. But the third example down here needs to be reversed in order to graph it correctly. Y is greater than 7. It should actually be pointing this way. So notice that the arrow does not match up with our original inequality until we switch the order. So take a look at the next few examples here. The first 3 you need to write in words what they say. Then state if you would use an open or closed circle and if the graph points to the left or the right. So take a look at each of those 3 right now and come back and check with me. Number 1, x is greater than -16. I would use an open circle and my graph would point to the right. For number 2, I actually switched the order to make it easier for me to understand and to graph. That would also be expressed verbally as k is greater than -6. Then I can draw an open circle and my arrow would point the same direction as my inequality, which is to the right. I did the same thing with number 3, so that states m is less than or equal to 22. That would be a closed circle heading to the left. For the next 3, you actually need to graph these. Let me just take a look at the first example with you. When we graph the inequality, we first have to number our number line, and this is called the critical value. The critical value tells us who's in the spotlight. -5 is in the spotlight, so I would list -5 and be careful with the negatives. This is going to be -4, -3, -2. I'm just going to number my number line for a few values to the left and the right of my critical value. Now I'm going to use a closed circle here, and I am going to make sure my arrow points this way. I want my arrow to go this way, and that is how you graph an inequality. So try 2 and 3 on your own and come back and check your answer. 1, 2, and 3 are shown here. In example 2, I would need a solid circle pointing to the right. Now you'll notice that here the arrow points to the left, but we always want the variable to be listed first. So when I switch that around, it says x is greater than or equal to -12, which is appropriately shown. Same thing with number 3. I need to switch it around so t is less than 13 and my arrow would point to the left. What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to take a look at this page in your practice packet. So go ahead and turn to that page. I'm going to do a couple of these with you and then I'm going to set you to practice on your own. Let's look at number 5. This is what we call a compound inequality. We can graph this. I have 2 critical values here. I have 4 and -2. So I'm going to number my number line from -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Notice that I have calibrated this approximately equal. I don't have something that looks like this. -3, -2, -1, 0, 1. See how that's all uneven? We don't want that. Now I'm actually going to graph what the situation tells me. I want x to be greater than -2. So that's an open circle, and less than 4. So my graph is going to look like this. In order for x to fulfill these conditions, it can be any number within that graph. I take a look at number 7, says x has to be greater than or equal to 3 or less than or equal to -1. So again, I'm going to list my values, 0, 1, 2, 3. I can always put an extra 1 in for good measure. And x is greater than or equal to +3, which looks like that, or x is less than 1. So this graph is saying I kind of have a split. I can have x be any number less than -1, or it can be greater than 3. Try the rest of those on your own and come back and check with me. Okay, 1 through 9 you can see pretty clearly. We did 5 and 7 together, so check the others, and I'll scroll down for 10 for you. Now if you have any questions on those, circle them or write them on a separate sheet of paper and we'll go over them tomorrow. Now that you know how to graph inequalities, we have to move on to learn how to solve inequalities. And basically inequalities are solved just like you solve equations. There's one exception to that we will go over tomorrow. So we're going to solve our inequalities, and then we are going to graph them on a number line. For number 1, I just want to isolate x, so I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, and in doing so I get x is greater than 2. Then I go to my number line, I list my critical value, and a couple values above and below. I know it's an open circle, and there's my answer. Not too bad. Let's try number 2 together. In number 2, my first step is to subtract 6 from both sides, so 3x is greater than or equal to 12. Then I divide both sides by 3, and x is greater than or equal to 4. Again, 4 is my critical value there. Place that in the middle. Couple other values. This is a closed circle, and it points to the right. Why don't you finish 3, 4, 5, and 6 and come back and check your answers. There you have it. 3, 4, 5, and 6. If you have any questions on these, make a note, take a highlighter, whatever you need to do, and we can discuss them tomorrow. Enjoy your evening.